Hey, what's up? I'm Mike Squires. This is Couchers Podcast number 182, and my guest, Justus Gash of FuzzImp. FuzzImp is a dirtbox guitar pedal company from Oregon. A very young company. They started this year, and Justus we chronicle his journey and some of the hard lessons he's learned. He seems to be doing great. He's selling pedals. One thing I think you realize as a small company, like keeping up with the work is difficult. So he's also gotten a crash course in customer service. And I ordered one of his pedals when he first started selling pedals, and it's great. It's a real simple fuzz pedal. He's got a number of pedals. He does these short runs of stuff. I'm sure that he's going to land on some final designs and just sort of keep them around for a while. But for now, I think he's doing short runs of stuff. So check him out. He's got a ton of fuzz pedal sort of demos as well that he's put up on his Instagram. So fuzzimp.com or fuzzimp on Instagram. IMP, FUZZIMP. So we had a great time talking. If you're enjoying, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. If you are enjoying, please support us on Couch Riffs. Support us on Patreon.couchriffs. Good Lord, it's early. Patreon.com/couchriffs. Yeah, what can I say? I appreciate your support. It's incredible, and it gets me closer to where I'm headed. I've got a bunch of stupid ideas that I think are killer, and I'm just going to keep rolling with it. And I'm going to do it and do it and do it till it's, not overdone. Just perfect. All right, so thank you for supporting on Patreon. I really appreciate it. That's the only place where you can download the audio for the cover songs that we do. So there's something. And every now and again I send out some custom merch. I'm going to start posting the videos there early for people to see. Like, for instance, this is Sunday as I'm speaking. There's a video coming out Wednesday, and I'm going to post the video up this evening so people can go watch it. So that's something, I guess, right? If you're into that kind of thing. I also want to thank Variety Coffee Roasters. VarietyCoffeeRoasters.com, at Variety Coffee on social media. I'm actually drinking their coffee right now out of this ball jar. It's delicious. It's delicious. I like the high hopes. That's what I like. Now, if you buy 2 boxes of coffee, their coffee is, it comes in small boxes, like instead of a bag, the bag goes inside of a box. It's very stylish and cool, and I'm into that kind of thing. So if you buy 2 boxes of coffee right now, when you get to the checkout portion, you type in Couch Riffs there at the checkout, and your your code, Couch Riffs, one word. They're going to send you a free Couch Riffs coffee mug. How killer is that? It's the only place where you can get one. You can also buy one from their website. So just go over to their website, go to merch, and boom, there it is. But check out the coffee. It's great. Out of Brooklyn. And they were some of the coolest people that I met when I got to New York. I liked them immediately. I hung out with them a lot. So thank you, Variety. You guys are great. Let's see what else. Thank you, River City Guitars in Spokane, Washington. RiverCityGuitars.com, at River City Guitars on social media. It's one of the only places where you can buy one of these things right here. That is the Marvin Guitars CN90, which I co-designed to celebrate the 100th episode of Couch Riffs podcast. That's right. Pretty killer. It's a great guitar. If you've got a guitar or a bass or an amp or any kind of vintage cool something or other that you want to sell, trade, swap, consign. I don't know if they do consign. Anyway, check them out. River City Guitars. I wouldn't send you anywhere that I wouldn't go. Sales.rivercityguitars at gmail.com. Maybe include a photo of what you're trying to move. We're going to get into the conversation now. Don't forget the golden rule. You know the golden rule? Treat people the way you want to be treated. Don't be an asshole. You're sideways, buddy.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sideways. There we go.
You're all kinds of
Hello.
wackadoo. Can you spin your phone sideways as well? Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
there it is.
Look at that.
There it is.
How are
Okay.
you?
Oh, I'm good. I've been working on pedals. We don't take vacations. Little vacations, but yeah. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you great, man. Yeah.
Yeah, this is my I got my YouTuber lapel thing going.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna
Cool.
it's gonna pull some stuff up in case I wanted to reference it. But yeah, no.
How's the temperature in Portland, Oregon?
It says on my little app thing that it's 83. It's
Oh,
it's
that's
it's, it's reasonable.
that's still out there. It's pretty warm.
Yeah, it was. We had a heat wave. I actually had to shut down for a weekend because when it was like 115 or whatever
Because the
it was
solder
too
wouldn't
much.
wouldn't cool off.
No, well, yeah, that, but the way my setup is, I vent out from the outside to get circulation so I don't die.
Oh,
And so it's venting that hot air straight into my face, and it was not happening. So, I mean, I got some stuff done at night, but it was just too much.
that's insane.
Yeah, no, it was ridiculous. Yeah,
A
no,
buddy
I
of mine
don't.
said that Portland, Oregon, for maybe it was just an hour or two at one point, was the hottest place on earth.
Yeah, it must be the way the sun rotates around or something. It must have hit us just wrong. But yeah, no, it's livable now. I don't know. I was thinking about changing my hours completely. It's always the thing about working for yourself is you have the flexibility to do stuff, but you have to get the work done still. So I don't know. I was really
But you've been really busy.
oh yeah. No, I'm always busy. Um, I'm really thankful. I get a lot of sales, but even for summer, but yeah, we could talk about what happened with summer. It's pretty interesting. It's like so yeah. No, I'm really busy all the time. I'm working on the rebrand. It used to be called FuzzImp with an S, and then I had enough like people not really vibing on the name, and and then one of my friends was like, "Oh, I thought it was the name it is now already." And we were talking, and I ended up getting set. It was someone had bought out the URLs for like all the good ones for the old name. So that was one factor in getting the name changed over. So now the
Is that
website
right?
is fuzzimp.com, which is really nice, nice and clean, easy to get to. So yeah, that's what I was. That was some of the impetus for the change.
Where did Fuzz Simp come from?
I just came up with it. That predates me even building pedals. I started using that, trying to like create a brand around it when I was just doing demo videos for companies like local small builders. I was trying to use that name because one of my friends suggested it's like you can do stuff with your personal name, but it's better to create kind of a brand that's separate from your personal
Sure.
account. So you have kind of a personal account and a like a business brand account. And so that's what I did. I started building the brand just around fuzz because simp in my mind is like a funny word. It's like guys who worship e-girls kind of a thing. So it basically
I don't
equates
I don't know
to
what that means.
yeah, it's simping is kind of a funny concept. The thing that really made me want to change the name though is I guess like in the modern vernacular, it's become this thing where it's like basically like idolizing, worshiping someone is you're
Got it.
simping for them. But I guess there at one point was kind of a like a negative racial thing to it. Like the
Oh,
word had some previous use. It's really uncommon, but it was like years and years ago. It was like kind of a racial thing, and so I was like, "Ooh, yeah, better to get ahead of that now." I mean,
Yeah,
nobody
you
that
want
I
to
know of,
avoid that.
yeah, nobody that I know of was thinking of it as that. It never came up in common conversation. It was more so they found the name like a little immature, and so I was like, well, you know,
It is
obviously I
a
want to
fuzz
make lots
pedal.
of, yeah, I want to sell lots of pedals. So if the name is all that was deterring people, that's we can fix that. So anyway,
But
so
the,
that's
so
kind of,
so I've been following your sort of progress for I think a couple years,
yeah, that
year
checks
and a
out.
half,
Probably,
2 years.
yeah.
So early 2020, I think, if I remember correctly, you sort of doubled down on pedal things, and it was like every week, or maybe even more frequent than that, right? It was like a new fuzz pedal that you were demoing.
Yeah, it was there towards the second half of 2020. So I want to say around like May, June of 2020, I really started getting heavy on demoing fuzz pedals exclusively. I was demoing pedals in general pretty regularly, but I started focusing just on fuzz around then. And it came out to where I was putting out a video almost every day for quite a while. It was like 2, 3 months straight. And then it slowed a little bit, but I
And
still
for a
was putting
different
out,
pedal every video.
yeah. Or I would like combo up stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was a lot of work. I don't think I could do that again and retain sanity, especially the old style of demos where it was, now I just kind of do like you see me playing and you see the pedal. I used to do this thing where I would sit and I would be talking about the pedal as I played it,
Right.
and then uh, you have to edit that all out, edit all the, so you don't have you talking over the sound of the guitar strumming in the room or stuff like that. But I don't do much of that anymore. I do it here and there, but just quick little demo videos now.
So was it always the plan as you were doing all those demos? Was that intensive research for behind the intention, a greater intention that to start FuzzSimp?
It's funny. I don't think I had much interest in building for a while. Like it took a while for it to get to where I was really interested in building specifically. I think I had it in mind like I would at least give some kits a try coming into 2021. That's what I did.
Right.
But I don't think I had a ton of interest in building yet. I think it was because I had so many friends that needed the demo videos, because that's kind of how it worked out, right? That's how I got so many pedals, is that I had friends that were small builders that they weren't really set up to do demos, so they had me kind of step in to take care of that for them. And I get like initially it was like, oh, you get like a pretty good discount, then you get like a steep discount, then you just get the stuff outright for free, you know. Um, and so I was getting all these pedals in, and it was starting to become a thing. Like I was regularly contributing on Reddit. Like obviously Instagram and Facebook are pretty easy. Reddit is this whole other thing. I actually don't super participate in there anymore because they have a whole different set of rules and restrictions for, they're basically anti self promotion, which
Right.
doesn't work for my business because it's just me. So I tried sharing some of the initial stuff, but it eventually became this thing where it was like, you're not supposed to advertise yourself on there. So it's like, okay, well, we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, I got shut down over there for posting Couchers videos.
Yeah. Yeah. They have a really specific culture that is kind of strange. I get why it exists and why they have it like that. So it's not just a flood of everyone trying to self promote and then there's no real community discussion.
But
But it's
there are
always
a ton
kind
of
of,
people posting their cover songs there. Like,
yeah,
"Hey, I recorded a
it's,
cover song," and then I was like, "I did too. Look at this." And then they're like, "Fuck you, man. Get out of here,
Yeah,
you.
that's
Yeah.
the last video I posted. There was a guy that, or an individual, I don't know who they were, that came after me pretty hard. And then they started coming after one of my friends because we had a co-branded pedal, and they were going off in the DMs to them. And it was around then I was like, well, maybe this is time to rethink this approach at least. So I don't know. I still find ways to contribute, and I have a lot of friends that are a part of that. It's the guitar pedal subreddit. It's pretty big,
Right.
and so I'll probably find ways to interact indirectly, but I'm not too worried about it now. It was a lot harder in the early days, just getting some momentum. So I would take anything I could get. So that's kind of where I ended up there. But yeah, it's just different. The social media is the thing about pedals specifically is that Facebook is super relevant. I don't think like if you're
I
doing
hate
band,
the platform though. Not the
yeah,
like the politics aside, and like how there are plenty of things about it. The algorithm is really frustrating, and once they got you pegged for someone who's trying to, you know, not post some kind of feel good kitty cat story or whatever, they just they've raked me over the coals. But even what's worse is that the interface is clunky and sucks.
yeah. The thing about that is for pedal sales specifically, they have the better ad platform of anything I've tried. So I've done
Right.
just Instagram ads. And for whatever reason, the tools on Instagram, even though they're connected, just the Instagram platform tools by themselves don't seem to be as effective as when I do it through Facebook and then it shares across both. So it shares what I did on Facebook over to Instagram, but it's not the main focus. So I don't know. There's something about pedal culture. There's still a lot of presence for people that fit my demographic on Facebook. So I use it a lot still.
How? Yeah, for sure. There are tons of Facebook groups
Yeah.
for the guitar world, right? It's insane.
Yeah.
Some kinder than others.
Yeah.
It's
But
it's a pretty mean world.
but I guess I could explain the company a little bit for people that might not be aware.
That
So
I would love that.
I started building pedals. My first pedal I ever built, at least this round, I did mess with it a long time ago, but I didn't get very far. The first pedal I built was on December 31st, 2020. So coming into New Year's of this year,
Yeah.
right? I had bought a kit kind of for Christmas, and I think I bought the kit and like a real basic Amazon tool kit that came with a couple hand tools and some like a soldering iron. And it was only like 20, 25 bucks for the tools. And then I think the kit was like 50 or 60 bucks, but it was pre-drilled and everything was labeled nice. So that was kind of a good way to enter. And it was a fuzz. And I spent the night working on it and I got it working pretty quickly. And it sounded so good. Like that's what made me get excited is that the first pedal I built, number one, I got it working. And number two, it sounded really good. And it sounded so good, it sounded better than half the stuff I had accumulated before that point. So
Right.
very quickly it turned into I went from I bought a kit to I got the parts. There's like tiers to how you can build pedals, but it's like you go from a kit and then you go like buy a PCB that has like a parts list, and so you got to hunt down all the parts. And I did a bunch of that, and then I think it was in my first week actually I commissioned a PCB from one of my friends that became the Monocle, which was my first pedal that I did. And then right
This
around
guy. This is not a monocle. What is this one?
that's the FuzzImp too. I was about to get to that because that has a cool story and that really helped the growth of the company. So around it was probably like week two or three in January. My friend reached out and his name is Jesse. He runs a company called Noise Therapy Effects, and he does a lot of layouts. So he does board design for a ton of small builders. And he said, hey, I want to help what you're doing, so I'll make you a design, basically. Like, I'll make you a design. I said, well, I really need a foot switch board, because that's one of the things that just makes it a lot easier, is you have the foot switch board, and it's a lot easier to work with than manually wiring to each solder lug. It's easy to melt
Right.
a foot switch. So I got the from him, I got the foot switch board, and then that pedal that you have, which was the FuzzImp 2, which is one knob fuzz. They call them OKFs, and it's basically a really classic. It's basically a fuzz face with just a volume knob where the gain is cranked. Is really what's going on in there. It's a little different because it's not quite as touchy as a fuzz face is, but that's basically what that is. And so he made that board, and once I got that board going and that pedal going, that really helped things, because I was selling them super cheap, and they sounded really super good. And it has two modes, so that has the dark and the bright mode. And there's a lot of companies that use that same circuit and charge, I don't know, whatever you want to charge for it. It's up close to $200, and I was selling them for 55 when I started out. So
Right.
I did pretty good. I sold a lot of them.
Yeah, you sold. I bought one. I'm super happy with it.
Yeah, it's good. The craziest part about that, I didn't, dude, learning how to run a business when you haven't really done it before is pretty tough,
So
especially,
let me
yeah.
ask you some questions about that. So
Yeah.
you're like, all right, I'm going to build a pedal and see how it goes. And then was it like a rocket ride? Were you all of a sudden, like you said, you got that thing working and you were pretty quickly, and you were like,
Yeah.
awesome. I guess I guess I can start a pedal company. So you ordered some more kits, or
Yeah.
you got a parts list and ordered all the parts. But then
Yeah.
some of those parts are probably bunk. You test them, whatever. You put a pedal together, you're troubleshooting, maybe certain things aren't working, you toss them out. Like, how hard is it for you to stay on top of inventory for I don't even, I'm going to use some words that I don't even know what they mean, like resistors and capacitors and switches
Hmm.
and jacks and everything, solder. Uh, did you upgrade your soldering iron? Because I imagine, like, uh, that's probably something that, I mean, that's the thing that you're using the most, probably, right?
Yeah. No, I have a bunch of answers for all of those. So I'll try and
Let's
knock them
have it.
all out. So, number one, when I started, so that first one worked, but it was kind of a simpler circuit. What I learned really quickly as I bought a few more kits is that, because if only it only takes one bad solder joint or one mistake to make the whole pedal not work.
Right.
So it took like three or four more before I could build something a little more complex. And I think it was in that first week, I basically started selling off everything that I had accumulated, because my goal in 2020 was to end it having 50 fuzzes, and I got almost 70. So I
Wow.
had all these pedals. Some of them I had earned through doing demos, and some of them I got cheap. And so I ended up selling off huge chunks of that pretty right away. And I bought a ton of parts. And then there was this point, and I think this is the warning I give a lot of people who want to get into DIY, not starting a business, just for yourself. There's this conception that you'll save a bunch of money building it yourself. And I always tell people it's not really true. Technically, yes, you can buy all the parts to build one pedal, probably cheaper than a comparable pedal from a builder would be. But realistically, once you get really into DIY, you end up like overstocking on parts, because it just makes sense to scale up and buy a lot more. So what it turned into is you have like hundreds of dollars of parts and circuit boards sitting on your table instead of completed fuzz pedals, and you're like, I got to figure this out, because I don't have any pedals anymore. Like, I got to figure out how to make these things. um Inventory now can be complicated, but I'll get to that. One thing that I want to encourage people with is that, like, I just use cheap soldering irons from Amazon. And there's a good reason for that, because you can get the high end soldering irons that are like $150, and the replacement tips are like $8. So you're talking, let's say a tip is good for like 100 pedals. That's about once a month. I need a new tip for $8. Well, I can get a whole soldering iron kit from Amazon for 11. So I've just bought like I've only went through like 3 or 4 soldering irons. So I've only spent $50 on soldering irons total.
Right.
Because they come with multiple tips too when you buy those cheap kits. So there's a couple different ones that I can use pretty easily. So I've gotten a lot of mileage out of those cheap irons. I think down the road I'll probably upgrade, but for now it works fine.
Here's how little I know about soldering irons. Because I learned early on, I'm great at taking things apart,
Mm-hmm.
not great at putting them back together or assembling new things, unless it's an IKEA table or some shit, right?
Oh yeah.
So I didn't know that a soldering iron came with different size tips.
Yeah, there's shapes. And I
Makes
initially
sense.
started with one that was like a pencil point, sometimes like a real fine point or a little blunted. And that works good, but I actually have switched. I had heard a couple of my other builder friends and just in general people do this. There's one that's like a flathead screwdriver.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally what the end looks like. And that one actually is a lot more effective than the pencil ones, just however it is about as
Or
you're
you
feeding the
can use
solder
it in
into
different
the,
ways.
it feeds it in a little better. Like I think it takes some getting used to. I don't think I liked it at first, but now I like it a lot. It moves a little faster because it's more of it's a surface area difference.
Right.
But however it works that you feed the solder in, I think the thing that made the biggest difference is that I had all these friends. I had like probably 6 or 7 builder friends that all had been building and were really experienced. So anytime I ran into issues or questions, I just asked them how to do stuff. Whereas if like when in the DIY world, it's especially like what you're talking about, because I was the same way. I was starting from square one. I had no idea how things worked. And there's just a couple simple like parts related things like how you orient something, how you read a circuit board. Like they don't explain any of the really basic stuff. There's an assumption you already know it. So it
have
can be really,
Have you gone
yeah.
back and bought any electronics books or like books on circuit reading and stuff like that?
So in my early stages, I did a ton of reading on my own. The good news is it's a community that's existed for a long time on the
Right.
internet. Like almost as like even back into the 90s, there was groups dedicated to DIY. So it's been going for quite a while where there's a ton of online information about anything you can think of. Sometimes you have to learn how to look something up. There's these things called data sheets. So a data sheet is like all the specs for a particular, especially transistors. It's pretty important, like transistors, IC op amp chips, and JFETs, which is they're all different things. But it's like it basically gives you the raw specs from the manufacturer of what the part is rated for, and it tells you how the part is oriented. So it's really important to learn how all that works. But yeah, there's a lot of information online and a lot of groups and a lot of people that have had the same problems, and so you can end up being able to troubleshoot pretty quickly with some Google prowess, I guess.
You've had a
But it's
pretty you've had a pretty heavy duty crash course in the last 7 months, 6 months.
oh yeah, I
but
don't mess around, man.
but you feel good about how things are going.
I am now. There was, man, there's just so much to it because a lot has happened. Uh, the hardest part, I think, for anybody that might be looking into building pedals, especially in the beginning stages, you need a lot of time. So I was still working full time for my dad back then. So I would get off of work and I would stay up till like 2 in the morning working on pedal stuff, looking stuff up, trying to learn more about how things went together and how circuits work, and then building kits as soon as all my parts came in. And so, you start doing that all the time. It's not hard to be like on for 70, 80 hours a week, which is really what it takes if you're
Right.
gonna accelerate that progress. Because a lot of people do it for fun. Like I'm in some groups now where people do DIY builds for fun. And They do it a lot slower. It takes them longer to figure stuff out. But I think because I tried to push myself harder, I learned things faster. But the one thing I did rush is I think I sold, I'm trying to remember what it was. It's probably like the sixth pedal I built, I sold. And it got to the guy and it didn't work. And that was kind of the realization like, hey, maybe I'm moving too fast with this, you know. And we
Right.
ended up working it out. But there's some of those kinds of things where I didn't know I was making mistakes until later, kind of a thing.
So you got a crash course in customer service too.
Yeah, that's I think the biggest lesson is not being prepared enough for success. So like everybody's like, oh, I want to do this for a living, I want to make money. But like once you get that kind of workload, it's really difficult to keep pace. So what happened was, and a couple things that I didn't want to do. So in the early days, and I want to say February, I started selling originals, which is like one you got. And I was only selling person to person. So if I ran an ad on Facebook, for example, they would have to DM me and send me the money via PayPal and hope that I sent them a pedal back. Like looking back, I'm like, how did I get that much business? Like I sold a lot of pedals that way. And
Right.
it was enough to like keep the thing really having some momentum. Because what had happened in January is I had lived in the same place for a long time. My roommate moved to Texas and I had moved into an apartment. So I had to figure out how to afford for the first time in a long time paying for a whole place by myself instead of having it split. So pretty much the only solution was for the business to be profitable really early. So I had motivation to succeed like as quickly as possible. So
Necessity is the mother of invention.
yes. And then what happened? So eventually I got a website. I think that's the biggest thing. So say you want to start a business, right? You can do it kind of small scale and then, you know, you sell to your friends or people online or whatever. But having a dedicated website, especially for this business, pretty early on was pretty critical because you need a way for people to buy it where it's less person to person. Like they're still buying it from you, but even like having a reverb store or a website, it just adds a lot of legitimacy to the company. It makes it a lot easier because people didn't. I liked talking to the people and walking them through which fuzz they might want because I only made two for a long time. So it was like getting to talk to them and find out what they wanted. And then my big move when I first started was the upsell, where it was, I think there were 55 each, but it was like 90 for two or something. So you would get a monocle and a pheasant two for 90 or $100. I don't remember. But basically, I did a lot of upselling so I could sell two and have more money. And yeah, I don't know. There's just
More
so
money,
much
less
to it.
time.
Yeah. Oh
Do you,
man.
do you have a favorite pedal builder? And is that, do you have a favorite pedal builder? Two pronged question. As far as someone that's doing designs and their aesthetic and
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing, right? And then do you have a favorite uh, builder who you would like to sort of model your growth after, like someone who started similarly and is larger, is like sitting up on a larger platform now?
Yeah, I think actually both of those both of those questions kind of loop back to the same person, and it's Jamie from Earthquaker. So Earthquaker Devices, if you've seen, you know, they make the plumes, they make a ton of stuff. He started a lot longer ago now. I think it was, I don't remember the exact year. It's early 2000s or some around there. And they started like in his garage or basement or whatever it was, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And that's the direction I want to go. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different business models, especially if you're fuzz centric. Like I have friends that instead of going scaling up to like where you get employees in a shop and stuff, they stay super boutique, but get more boutique. So they're selling more expensive stuff, just less. And that's one business model. That's kind of like the analog man model. It's
Right.
still a pretty small operation as far as I know. I mean, yeah, they sell a lot of pedals and they're expensive, but I think it's still pretty small.
Well,
I have
there's like
friends that are
a
kind
hell
of,
of a long lead time to wait for one of his pedals too, right? Because he's
yeah,
just like, well, I work this much, and
yep. That's how one of my friends is. Pat from Collector Effectors, I think is probably one of the most successful full-time builders I know. So he focuses on vintage designs that are like, he only uses obsolete parts basically. So like, you can't just go online, and I mean, you can go online some places, but you can't just go to a major wholesaler and buy the kinds of parts he uses, because they're all new, old stock, or salvaged. So
right,
he's building point to point tone benders and fuzz factories and like all the major fuzz designs, but to spec with the right parts by hand. Everyone is tuned. I'm pretty sure he builds on a breadboard. I don't know his total build process, but he like, every single pedal is a one-off. So it's like a customer, he talks to the customer, gets to know them, builds a fuzz around them, has a custom finish that's probably one-off. So he charges quite a bit more than I do, but I got one. It's really, really quality stuff. That's one business model I've seen that works. It's basically, as you get busier and you get more exposure, you tier out your pricing so it makes sense for your time. But my goal is to get more like a small shop with a few employees and scale upwards. Maybe not quite as big as Electro Harmonics, but something like an Earthquaker, where they have a pretty legit operation. I don't know how many employees total they have. I want to say like maybe 60 or 70. It's quite a few. They run a
they
full
continue
on,
to put out killer stuff.
they put out a, yeah,
They put out my favorite overdrive pedal, the
yeah, Plumes probably. Oh,
Palisade.
Palisades.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't tried the plumes.
It's good. It's
Yeah,
that's they did exactly what they planned to do with that pedal. And I've tried to find what my pedal is. So they have a pedal that they essentially, it pays for itself, but it's not super profitable, but they sell so many and get so many people hooked on that one pedal that they sell a lot more, was kind of the marketing strategy that I heard. So it's $100 and it's the best tube screamer you can get for $100. I think that's
right.
pretty much, I wouldn't argue with anybody that says that. You can get stuff that's a little cheaper, that's close. You get stuff that's a little more expensive, that's a little nicer, but for $100 or less used, I think it's the best tube screamer you can get. That's why I don't even make a tube screamer. It's like, the plumes exist. I don't need to compete for that.
On that note, I mean, right now, looking at your website, there's a long list of pedals already. Many of them, it looks like you maybe built some, they were limited runs, sold out, or maybe they're discontinued because of the name and rebrand.
Yeah. So I left that up just so customers could have a reference. I need to. So
I
one of
think
the
it's
things
cool
I
to
did,
have a historical timeline of things that you've offered. Yeah.
yeah, I want to have a better layout where it's like a legacy products page and current offerings page. But I use Big Cartel because I'm not a website designer and I needed something pretty quick with a storefront. So I just like adopted into their system. And I know that you can customize it on the back end a little more than it is, but basically they give you templates and then you set it up how you want. But one of the things I had is, if I handle uh, like a product page wrong, it does weird stuff on the back end of the website for me when I go to fill orders still. So I had to leave it like present so that I could still account for some orders that are in the system.
Right.
But I wanted historical context for all the previous offerings, especially when it comes to resale. So something that was big in my mind when I was starting is that some of the small builders, they didn't have websites. They had a Facebook page with like a little bit of something going on, not a ton of Instagram presence. So when it came to pricing out something, like say, the dude who bought it goes broke and has to go into a Guitar Center and get something for it to get food for the day or whatever the
Sure.
situation is. They're going to look it up in their systems. It's probably not going to pop up on Reverb, and there's no website. So they're just like, okay, we'll give you $20 for it or whatever it is. And so the only way to circumnavigate that is to have some kind of record of what the thing sold for.
Right.
And luckily, I didn't know this until the other day. A few things have been sold under the old name on Reverb. You can go to sold listings and see, and they all were holding their value really well. So that was good news to me.
Great.
There's probably about 12 listings, and they were right around like coupon pricing. Like I've done coupons that were cheaper than what people were selling them for. So that made me happy.
Great. Do you have, so you're very, how many, how many fuzzes are you offering currently? And B,
Right.
do you have the ambition to branch out? I mean, fuzz is right in your company name. Do
Right.
you do you have the ambition to go outside of that and do overdrive, or I guess you have a distortion also.
Yeah.
I don't know the difference between overdrive and distortion. Um, Even though I have a bunch of pedals and have been using them since the 80s. Like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty simple.
Yeah.
And
No, yeah, for sure. there's, that's a couple questions. So I wanted to knock them out real quick. Um, Number one, I have a bunch of legacy products from the old name that art wise, I just don't have a new art that's designed around the new name. And I wanted to revamp those anyway. So I have things that are, I have a boost. I have something that does what an overdrive does. I have some other products, but I'm carefully and slowly rolling out what offerings I have now. So right now in the store, uh, by the time this airs, there should be three things for sale in the store. And that's the Surprise, which is a high gain distortion that borders on like a sludgy fuzz at times. There's the Machina, which is two fuzzes in one. And then there's the Sender, which will probably be out really soon. So I did something interesting with that. I have ambitions to get into things that are really not analog drive pedals, but they take a lot of capital. So I have someone that's willing to do DSP stuff and maybe get into modulation.
awesome.
But the both the dev work and the prototyping, especially if it's DSP, is a lot more expensive than what it takes to make an analog drive pedal. Like just to ballpark it, just for me to create a new product, like get a board designed, get the parts going for the first run, and stock what I might need is about $500 or $600 for each model. So that's for an analog pedal. So that covers first run of boards, all the parts to go with it, especially if it's something I don't stock. And to build the first 10, actually it's probably closer to 1,000 if you're going to build the first 10. But it's basically, it comes out to something like that, right? With a DSP pedal, it's thousands of dollars to get it done.
So there's a lot more risk involved.
Yeah. And the part cost is exponentially higher. There's actually a shortage. So one of the interesting things about the shutdown is it affected a lot of different industries in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And one of the biggest ones was in manufacturing overseas, where virtually all parts are made. There's not a single pedal that doesn't have something made in China as of right now, unless it's vintage, because we haven't had manufacturing for most of those parts in decades. So what that meant is when things shut down in China, manufacturing shut down just long enough to deplete the world's supply of a bunch of parts. Like whatever was in inventory got depleted over a course of several months. And there's stuff that today is back ordered until next year
Have you
already.
considered, like, what does it take to get into manufacturing those components?
Oof. It depends on what it is.
Right.
There's some things where it's just not cost effective.
Right. Switches.
Yeah, switches, diodes and capacitors and resistors are all really inexpensive. Technically, it probably is possible to manufacture them, but it just doesn't make sense when I can buy Like the best resistors you can get are a cent and a half. They're not even 2 cents. It's in between
Right.
1 cent and 2 cents. So it's like it just makes sense, especially if you're buying in a lot, to just buy them how they come. But there's silicone. There's a silicone shortage with a bunch of chips and a bunch of different components, and it affected a lot of different pedal companies. There's a one of the main DSP chips right now that a lot of builders use is sold out worldwide. So the only ones you can get are from somebody that has a supply of them. And I ran into that for one of my parts. So that shroot pedal that I did that sold a lot,
Yeah.
that uses a JFET. That the style that I use is a little old school. They've switched to, they call it surface mount. So surface mount is the little tiny components that are mounted directly to the board. And then there's through hole, which is where you solder it through the hole, right? So I use through hole ones, and it got to where like I used this one specific part number and they were sold out everywhere. I went through like 4 suppliers. They said they had inventory, but then it would change to where it says, oh, it's going to ship next year. And I
Right.
was like, oh. So I finally got a hold of 500 more. And it was pretty scary, you know.
You got found 500 more, but good Lord, you had to pay 3 cents each for them.
You know what? It actually, I was expecting to pay close to $1 a piece, and it wasn't that much. So,
You
because
mean
I,
you?
yeah,
It's a part that would normally cost 2 cents at the most, and you were expecting to pay $1?
no, they could, those actually cost quite a bit. The
Oh, those.
the third party resale value of JFET is about $1. That's
Right.
pretty common. I mean, sometimes they're a little cheaper if you're buying wholesale. So this is a thing that I learned pretty early on, is there's like you can go to the equivalent of like a musician's friend or a guitar center for pedal parts. There's like a handful of companies, they just sell, they're made for DIY people, so they
Yeah.
sell
Not for big.
primarily to their setup. They make it easy. They have like low minimum requirements, so you can order, you know, $1 worth of one part, because you probably are only building 1 or 2 pedals, so you don't need to buy the bulk to build 50. So their setup, they charge a little more, but they make it easier on you, so you can order, you know, what you need. But then you can go the next step up, which is you go to the wholesaler that sells for the wholesalers that sell to every electronics industry. So not just DIY pedals, they're selling to everybody.
Right.
And their interfaces are the worst. Like
Yeah.
I've never seen a worse interface. Um, it's so bad. Like
No, it looks like an old like catalog, print catalog.
exactly. Yeah. It's just
Same with like
super
car
basic.
parts and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, it's all the same stuff. Um, so anyway, you got these, the wholesaler price is just outrageously good, but you have to buy in bigger quantities.
Sure.
And I hear that there's some suppliers I could go to where I'm buying, like I still buy some stuff at like the retailer level. Like I get a discount because I'm buying quantities, but there's the people that sell to the people I'm buying from now. You can jump them and go direct and save a lot of money, and it's the exact same quality of part. You're not compromising that.
Right.
So it's just learning that over time, because I went from like hobbyist to side hustle to full time really quickly. So not everything caught up right away. So I'm still figuring a lot of that stuff out. And the hard part was I had friends that were small builders and that maybe it had some success. So they run like a pretty successful side business that does pretty good. Like it's a significant part of their life and supplements their side income. But I started running into this thing pretty quickly where I didn't know very many people that were the next level up, where they're full time, but they're still kind of accessible. Because I know some people that are like, they run a full time pedal business, but they're really busy. Like, you know, they have a name. Like they're not gonna just chat it up with you randomly about whatever. Like they're trying to run their business. So,
Right.
but I got to meet a couple. I've got to be able to talk to a couple of those guys a little bit that are that next tier up. But it was a big growing pain going from my level to where I am now. I still don't have it dialed. The hardest part,
It hasn't been that long, man.
no,
Take it
you know
easy on
what's
yourself.
what's killing me is, and also anyone who has a current order, make sure to check in through the email system if you're wondering lead times. So this is the thing that's killing me right now is coming into March as things started really picking up. Like I started getting quite a few sales, and then I started the website, and almost immediately, and that was in April, almost immediately things started escalating really fast. So I went from doing, I think it was like 60 or 70 sales in March to 160 in April.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's good. The money was really good. The thing I didn't realize is how much work it would take to get all of those built, especially running into issues. So you can say, okay, I can build one pedal in X amount of time, right? And it costs X amount for the parts. And that's fine, right? But as you start scaling that up, and especially because I had quoted people, my biggest mistake was this. I quoted people like 2 to 3 weeks at first or something, because I used to be able to pull that off pretty easily because I could get out like 20, 30 pedals a week, right? Well, if you get like 60 sales all in a week, that means that
Yeah.
that's 3 weeks worth of work right there, plus whatever was before it. Plus, then stuff starts stacking up after it. So I got in this really bad spot where
You're working
I
from
had,
a deficit.
yes. And then some other stuff came up where there's part supply issues. And one of the things that's the hardest for me, because I've never had to deal with this before, is where to put the money. So I put a ton of money into the parts for the stuff I had orders for. And then I also, in the background, developed like 6 new products and bought all the parts for those. And it's been carrying me for quite a while. But the problem is I didn't track where exactly the money was going all these different ways. And so I'm overstocked on parts I don't need. I need things that I don't have as much money for.
Right.
And then you have a couple returns and refunds. I actually have a really good DOA rate, so it's dead on arrival. Only had, I think since March, I've had 2 or 3 outright DOAs where it doesn't work. And then I had like 2 where it was something we could fix via email. So, yeah. Because I spend a lot of time with each unit, because that's what I don't want.
Sure.
I don't want somebody to get their unit and it doesn't fire up. I would rather be late than rush it and pay for it on the back end.
Well,
So,
also, you want them to get something that works too, because if it
yeah,
works and they like it, you know, they'll be more likely to check out future products that
yeah.
you release.
And I would say like 1 in 6 sales is probably a repeat customer. So
Right.
it's pretty significant. I bring in new people a lot, especially with the new launch. That's why I was constantly rolling out new products, because I didn't know what was going to catch and what wasn't. It wasn't until the Shroot I had a product that sold more than like 10 units. So I would roll something out, show it off, and it's like kind of gauge the reaction. But I just didn't know how to advertise it and how to run a product cycle. It's like I'm just trying to figure everything out simultaneously. Plus plus manage inventory. So there was like a time where I ran out of that part. All of a sudden I'm like, hey, I'm out of these. And there's this mad scramble going through all these companies to find it. And then there was other times where like the same supplier I've been using for the same part and they always have it in stock just doesn't. Like one day they just are like, oh, we're out of stock. It's going to be 3 weeks for that part. It's like,
Do you have the ambition to build amplifiers or
mm-hmm.
like any other things like onboard guitar effects or anything like that?
Amps I want to get into eventually. The only thing about amps is the the cost is so much exponentially more than what's in a pedal. Like, you can hold a handful of analog components in your hand and it's like, $5 or $10. Like, it's realistically, that's what is in most analog pedals, is less than $10 in parts,
Right.
especially at wholesale price. But an amplifier, especially, you got tubes in there, you've got transformers, you've got some parts that are pretty expensive, you got a
Have a lot
chassis.
more labor too.
It's a lot more. It's a time thing. It's supposedly it's not too bad for the smaller wattage amps. I really came close to building a JTM 45. I really wanted to because I love Marshall stuff. That's actually, I think, one of the secrets to fuzz that a lot of people um, kind of miss. Like, if fuzz isn't really your thing, there's a good chance you're probably doing it wrong.
Right.
Like, it takes some, more than any other effect. It's really picky about the pickups that you're using, the way you play, and the kind of amp sound you're running into, more so than like an overdrive, a boost, or virtually anything else. Like, if you have too much gain with a fuzz that it's not super, that doesn't play nice with that, it's going to get really, it'll kind of like smooth way out and it'll kind of get like washed out in the sound. There won't be a ton of definition. It'll just be kind of this thick mud of sound. And there's a time for that. Or if it's too clean, it can sound really fizzy and kind of harsh. And I see a lot of people doing that maybe haven't liked fuzz, is they'll run it into like ultra clean fenders and stuff. And you can do that. You can do whatever you want. But my favorite is like a just on, it's not distorting or crunching, but it's like if you really laid into it, you're almost like half AC/DC level. That's like the sweet spot for fuzz, I think.
Yeah.
Is like it's just barely breaking up, but when you hit that with fuzz, it just saturates a little better. And especially the Marshall I just use the Origin 20, which is based on like a Plexi JTM 45 kind of thing. It has this cleanish, it's still pretty clean, but the way it saturates when it gets hit with fuzz is totally different than an amp that's super crazy high headroom clean.
Right.
So I think it took me a while to figure that formula out, but I see that a lot in, even on my ads, people comment like, "Oh, I don't like this sound." It's like, no, this is what good fuzz sounds sound like. Like, this is what they were made for.
Were you in bands before?
I was. So um I actually don't talk about it too much because I try to keep the business and some of my personal life from the past separate. But I grew up in church playing music a lot. Like, we had like youth group concert type stuff. So I started playing in bands when I was 13 and playing every week. And so I got a lot of stage time and practice time because of that. And I took it pretty serious pretty early on. But I kind of lost interest in bands as I got into my like early mid 20s. Just like, I'd kind of been in some bands for a long time and it's like, man, this is too much work. I don't enjoy this anymore. So the only band stuff I would do was like, if a friend was like, oh, we need someone to fill in for a couple gigs. And so I've done a few things like that over the years.
Interesting. Not a lot of fuzz going on in church group also, right?
No,
I'm
I
making an
no,
assumption, but that's generally
yeah.
cleaner, maybe overdrive, reverb, and delay.
Yeah, we played, it was kind of an interesting arrangement. We played like pretty heavy music because it was like separate. So there's like worship service, and then there was like this Saturday thing that was like the young people would run concerts kind of a thing.
Got it.
So we were playing pretty heavy music, and I was really pedal driven in my early days before I went digital, because I went full on digital for like years and years and years. Um, I found that like a ton of pedals was too noisy, and the sounds that I was after, like that metalcore tight progressive gent sound, just sounded so much better with digital gear because you could gate it and EQ it and get it
Right.
all nice and tight. But yeah, no, I was playing like big muffs and One of my favorite pedals back in the day was the Vox Saturator, like when that came out, because I was a huge Satriani fan. But
Right.
yeah, I think Big Muff was probably my first fuzz. I remember this stage in the early 2000s. I don't know if it was reading a lot of guitar magazines or what, but I had this weird obsession with fuzz really early on. And I tried really hard to make it sound good. Like I bought like probably 10 different fuzz pedals and I wasn't using them in the band. And I was just trying to make them sound good because I was like, no, I know it'll sound good, but I didn't have the formula right. And so my my fuzz journey was kind of stunted until later in life.
Yeah, I don't think that I had a great experience with fuzz pedals either
Yeah.
early on. I own
No.
a half dozen now, but
Mhm.
I didn't really get it.
No. And I didn't get into doom metal at all until I want to say I got into doom metal sometime last year, just because there's a big Facebook group called Pedalboards of Actual Doom. It's really active and it's very fuzz driven. And so as I started getting into fuzz, I realized that, hey, this is like the one group where they really enjoy the use of fuzz. And there wasn't a ton of guys that were specifically catering to that group and that genre of fuzz playing. Like there's some stuff on YouTube, but doom metal had kind of like it kind of peaked in the early 2000s and then it went down and it came back up and it came back down. So I had kind of missed, there was a big wave in like 2014, 15 or so, I would say, that there was kind of a big uptick in doom metal again, which is very fuzz driven and fuzz friendly. Just playing big, heavy downtune riffs really loud with fuzz,
It's
like
pretty
that
fun.
extra. Yeah, it's really fun. And so it took me a while to get that. And the whole thing, like just volume, like when your guitar, like you can sit at home and play with your practice amp, or especially like I used to play on headphones or little studio monitors. You don't get the same, your guitar doesn't behave the same as when you're playing with a lot of volume. All of a sudden, all that extra noise is, you know, shaking the guitar and you're getting extra vibrations and extra harmonic content. Like you're hearing a lot more of what each
Oh,
piece of the thing is doing. And I think that's where fuzz really shines. Is like you play fuzz on a quiet amp that's too clean, it's not going to sound good. I mean, you might like it, but that's not what I like. Like you got to really, you have your amp juicing up a little bit and you really got to play with some volume to get the full effect.
do you aspire to play in a band again?
I always think about it.
I mean,
I
because
think
we're talking about playing
my
loud guitar right now.
I do like playing loud guitar. I think I'm gonna have to eventually. I have done some pretty strange. I've done like the last show I played, I think, was with my solo project doing some metal stuff. I was really into kind of the drone metal and ambient drone stuff. And there is some place for that here in my area, especially now that things are opening back up. So I think there might come a time. I think part of my problem is that I don't get along in the band context the best. I think my tolerance for uh, ego has diminished as I got older. Like
Right.
I think I was more willing to put up with stuff to play music when I was younger than I am now. Like it's if people aren't on the same page musically, like I ran into this a lot. Like I was the one who took it super serious, and I would be with people that either they came at it from a different approach, like they just wanted to jam, or they just didn't take their instrument and their gear seriously. Like that always bugged me. So I've always been kind of like, but it's cool if you find the right people. I think that's the thing that changes though, is that if as you get older and play with more people, you find people that are really easy to play with, then it makes it easier to put together a group.
Do you think that what is happening right now for you for FuzzImp would have happened if 2020 didn't collapse around all of us?
Uh, no, it wouldn't have happened because the sales wouldn't have happened the same way. I think because people had to stay home, they were buying more gear than ever. So it's basically like shooting fish in a barrel to be starting a company and having affordable products. Because I could tell you,
If
I
you
get a lot
didn't
of
have
sales on. Yeah,
2020 as sort of your launching pad and that heavy stretch of fuzz demos, and
right.
do you think that you still would have been motivated in the same way?
No, no, I probably would have kept working with my dad doing cabinets. That's what I've always done in various. I didn't always work with my dad, but basically since I graduated high school and a little bit of college that I did, I basically my only full-time jobs were always in the cabinet industry. So that's pretty much what I've always done is construction and cabinets. For a while, I worked in big scale manufacturing. This company has like 1,000 employees. This in Newburgh, which is not far from here, that does dental equipment. And they
Mm.
have a whole section that was all around furniture, so cabinet building. I think that was probably some of the experience that helped the most with the company, honestly. Like working in a manufacturing assembly environment teaches you a lot of things that you wouldn't learn in other kinds of fields. It's like process optimization, like keeping track of inventory, learning how to like have checklists and processes in place for things. I think it'd be pretty hard to develop that from scratch, but since I came from that environment, I think that helps a lot too.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. But
It is.
lucky for you, you didn't step into a CEO position at a place at
No,
Boss. You know?
no. You know what I was just talking. I talk about this a lot. I hang out on Discord with some in some groups, which is like Facebook with less people that are tend to be a little better behaved. And so I hang out on there a lot in these pedal groups and was talking a lot about what Boss has done historically. Like Boss set the standard for pedals in such a crazy way so early on. And their circuits are so much more advanced than you would think from how they look. Like a DS1, comparatively circuit wise, is so much more advanced than like any fuzz pedal that's ever been built. And you can buy a DS1 for like
59
$30.
bucks.
Yeah, 59 bucks new. I remember this is the other thing because I got into gear. I'm 31. I got into gear pretty seriously when I was like 12, 13. And I was working with my dad like after school and on weekends and on summers. So I had money to buy gear pretty early on. So it was like what stuff used to cost is still how I think of it. So,
But he
like
had
Black
been buying
Russian.
stuff since the 80s, so
Yeah, yeah.
same.
It's like what is a Black Russian Bigma for? Oh, it's over 50, $60. Like selling for
Nope.
200.
What? Yeah. What about the green one with the big clunky knob?
It's four, four, five, three if it's really rough shape.
That was 75 bucks.
Yep, not anymore. No, those are cool, man. So one of my things that was one of my favorite pedals. I used to have two Black Russians, and I had one way back in the day
I have one
when
up
we
here.
were. Oh, you have one?
Yeah, up here on my giant pedal display.
Does it have the thin walls or the thick walls?
I don't know. Hold on. Let's see.
Because there's two different versions of the black, and I didn't even know this other one. That's the good one. Yeah, you got the good one. I had one of those. So some of those aren't the full 7D transition board, but those are V8s, but they're the good V8s. So there's two different cases that they made, which was this is the one that was like the year between when they discontinued the green and they made the more modern one that they made a lot of. You have the in between one that has the good case. So yeah,
I don't know
there's
the
so
difference.
the circuit can be barely different. I think they use a little better parts than the one that you have and the one that I had. But generally across the board, and this is the funny thing about those pedals that people celebrate these things so much. It's like I can't even use a Black Russian until it's modded because it's so unreliable. and, and I have the jacks. So this because both of mine were this way. I have the jacks switched because they're wired backwards for no reason.
Yeah, no, that.
I
Yeah.
and I have a power jack added. It's modern because some of them I don't think they ever had a power jack. I think it was always battery
I
only.
don't think mine has. No, you can't.
Yeah, you have to run the little You get the little
Nine
dongle and run
volt.
it out the
Yeah.
back. Yeah. But yeah, so I have power jack, flip the switches, and the biggest one is that the jacks themselves, like the audio jacks, are plastic, and they were really cheap Chinese plastic jacks that they used back in the day, like worse quality than what Behringer uses now. So those got to be switched. So you switch those out as soon as you can, and then the switch itself, it's really likely to go bad if it hasn't already. I'm sure there's dozens and probably hundreds of Russian muffs that ended up in trash cans because the switch went out and the person didn't know what was wrong with
Right.
it.
What?
they're so cool, man. I've always loved those.
What? Yeah, I still don't know. Like, I couldn't tell you what kind of fuzz this is and how it's different from the other
Oh,
handful of fuzzes that I have. I don't know how to articulate it. I know, like, when I'm trying for a specific sound, what to
mm-hmm.
grab, but help
Yeah,
me out with that. Give me a
perfect.
quick education.
So big muffs in general, and there's this kind of a hot debate. So big muffs and rats technically are not full fuzz pedals. Anybody that loves fuzz will say both are kind of in the family, but they technically are distortions because of how they do hard clipping with diodes. All that really means is that they have a little more articulation, especially in the low end, than most full-blown fuzz pedals, things like tone benders, fuzz faces, and then the list goes on, Fuzz Factory. Because they tend to have clipping diodes and how they use them, that is kind of where some people draw the line. Some people say that's not how it works, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, I think of a big muff is it's a mid-scooped distortion that has a fuzzy low end. So especially Russian ones were a lot more distortion because they use lower gain transistors. So
So
they're
can
not as
you
blown
can
out.
you approach big muff sounds with the DS1?
Yeah, if you have it, if you have the DS1 modded a little bit, I think the way the DS1 clips is a little different than Big Muff because Big Muff has 4 gain stages. I don't know how many a DS1 has off the top of my head. I only know the Big Muff one a lot because I did a Big Muff pedal and I've never fought with a circuit so hard to make it sound good. So, like most of my designs, I have a starting point and I'll play with a couple components that are really important and tweak some values and it's done. Like it's exactly what I want. It's loud enough, has the gain, it's articulate, whatever I wanted. Big muffs, I don't know why. I used to like them more. It's so hard for them to get in the ballpark of the fuzz sound I want. Getting the volume loud enough,
Right.
getting the way it sits in a mix or on its own to sound right. It just wasn't happening with this Big Muff board.
And so what is different in a rat from a big muff?
Well, Rat, oh, and they did make op amp Big Muffs. So the surprise pedal, this is what is probably confusing to people. The surprise is that it doesn't sound like a Big Muff. It looks like one because I love the look of big box muffs. It's like my favorite look of all time.
Right.
And I had the existing art from a pedal I built called the FuzzImp, and it was like my favorite thing I had done so far. And I sold a couple of them, but it just didn't really catch. I don't know if it was the price point, is that there's been so many muffs made, like modded ones, whatever. There's just so many out there. It could have been the timing because it was during the slowest part of sales. Doesn't matter. So I built the Surprise, which is an op amp based pedal. And they did make op amp muffs, which is like what Billy Corgan's known for using. They make it black and orange.
Yep.
VHX does. They have the op amp thing enough. They did the promo with him and stuff. So a rat also has an op amp. So it's like a chip that gets the distortion instead of a handful of transistors. And then the way a rat works is really interesting because I have a rat pedal too. And so I had to learn this is basically how it works. So if I decide I want to do something, I'll have a board made and I'll start going through the circuit and really analyzing the schematic and going through articles online that people have written about what components do what and when you change them in either direction, what happens. So the way a rat works is it's like a big muff is a scooped mid. The way the tone control works, the short version is it does like 2 filters that scoop the mids out. That's why it sounds how it does. A rat does almost the opposite. It does two filters in the distortion stage that make it mid focused. So, and it has a really unique way that it does it. It's the way the filtering is done in a Rat is totally different than almost any other pedal, because the part where it's clipping is where the filter is instead of like an external filter. So the more you know.
How, we're really in the weeds with the nerdery right now, and I like it. Here's a question.
Yep.
Why do I prefer the big muff over the Rat pedal?
It
And
sounds bigger.
but I also I guess I assume that I want the mids to poke out so that I can hear it better in the context of a mix or in a band
Mhm.
setting. But if the mids are scooped, uh, how how is that the sound that I'm still preferring?
And this is where the amp part of the equation really comes into play.
Gotcha.
So like with a distortion pedal, like a classic distortion pedal, I mean Rats technically are one, but like DS1s or anything that's kind of emulating a preamp, those really want like a super clean platform because all the shaping is going to come from the pedal, right? With a muff, it's such an old design. It's kind of like it's doing what it's doing, and you have to make the amp match it. So if you have a really mid forward amp, like a Marshall or anything in the Marshall family, Orange, anything like that, when you hit a big muff with it, you almost balance out those two things because you have a mid forward amp and you have a scoop sound. So it kind of balances it and gets it a little more where you want it. So big muffs just sound cool because they sound big. Like they have a big sound to them. Because of the way the mid scooped, you make it louder, it becomes this kind of thick wall of sound. The hard part with the muff circuit is making that filtering just right so that it leaves the mid range in, but it's not too pokey and weird because then it doesn't sound like a muff anymore. But if it's too scooped, then it just gets lost. So it's a careful balancing act of how it's going to sit. And the Russian also has more mids than some of the like an NYC or a Triangle or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And my dog's going crazy. Can you hear it?
Oh, it's all good. Oh, a little bit.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
what's
there's
the
there's a
difference
tons of
between
yeah. Go ahead.
an overdrive and a distortion pedal?
So the whole gamut of drive pedal, because I have a pedal called the Crusher, which is what the Shroot was based on, and it started with the gain control at like clean boost, and then at the far end, with depending on where the tone was set, it was like HM2. So technically, that pedal covered the full range of from like clean. I think of it as like this. It's basically how much clipping is going on, how much saturation is going on. So if it's basically clean, it's a boost. If it starts subtly clipping or soft clipping, so it's like what a tube does, it's just kind of warming it up, making it a little blurry. I consider that overdrive. Distortion is when it starts crunching. So it's like it's beyond saturated. It's not really clean anymore. It's kind of crunched in on itself a bit. And then I think of fuzz as there's so much saturation that it becomes a square wave distortion, which is really the kind of the definition of fuzz. Is where it's like you put a limiter on, you turned everything up really
Right.
loud, and you turn a limiter on that's clipping all that headroom off, so you get this fat sausage of sound. That's literally what a fuzz does on the inside. Is you're turning up the sound so much, but then you're limiting the output, so then it just becomes this big crunchy wall of sound.
It's a sausage party.
It's a sausage party. Yeah, fuzz sausage party. That would sell.
That's a that's a great fuzz pedal.
You know, sometimes the names for things, the ideas for things come from a nothing conversation.
Right.
So you're not even remotely thinking about it. And sometimes the best idea, or it'll come from like somebody that has nothing to do with the industry. Like it'll just come from a friend that has an idea. And it's like, oh man, like that's a great idea. I should try that. And you kind of have to be always on. So that's the thing. It's like I'm not always soldering every part of every day. Like
Right.
I would say like soldering and assembly is probably only about a quarter of my day, or maybe a little more some days, but it's not very much of my day. A lot of it is spent like managing emails, brainstorming, checking orders, like going through printing things, managing inventory, and then a lot of it's doing research on ways to improve stuff that I already
Right.
do. Because that's the thing is like I don't I try to spend around an hour a day playing guitar for its own sake. Like I like to try and enjoy it, and I also every like once a week, even if I'm really busy, I'll take like an hour or two that's just to try something new or build a pedal I haven't built before because I need it for it to still be fun. Because the one thing that really burned me out when I had all those April orders and I started getting super behind is I had to build a lot of the same pedal over and over, and I realized how much I hated that. It's like,
Is there any part of your future design where you will have certain things that you can either pre-make,
mhm.
and because that part of the design is consistent through,
Yeah.
multiple models?
Yeah, so there's a school of thought with modern small pedal building where, and I don't do it, you can do it this way, and it really makes sense as you start getting more complex circuits, especially things like a modulation delay, reverb, anything like that has like 4 times as much parts as anything I build right now. So what you do is you design the board with SMT, so it's got the little tiny parts, and you have them prefabbed. So the manufacturer, instead of ordering a normal PCB that has a bunch of holes in it, those solder points, they send you a board that's pretty much mostly complete. You might have to solder a couple small things on besides jacks and switches, but like they basically prefab it. It's usually done overseas. There's a couple outfits in the US that do it, but it's so expensive. Nobody does it that way. They might, but I really doubt it. So that's kind of one of the schools of thought for pedal building. Some people look down on that. I really don't. I would like to move that direction. What it really comes down to is I have to find a designer that I can afford to do the initial setup so that they take my circuit and then they lay out the board to match with all the right correct info so that when I send it off, they have the file they need to build it to spec, and then I'd pay a little more to have the parts added or whatever. But that's pretty common practice now, and I do want to move that way just because I reach like there's only so many hours you can work in a week. I'm sure you know this more than anybody. Would you still running like 3 jobs or something? Two
No, no,
jobs at a
no.
podcast?
I've been a year away from that where, yeah, for a minute I had two full-time jobs and two podcasts, which amounted to three podcast episodes recorded and edited per week. It was unheard of.
Yeah, I can do that for like 6 weeks, and then I just have like a meltdown and I shut down for like 3 or 4 days because that's kind of what happened. I got really stressed out coming out of April, and especially as like, so what kind of happened is I was also, I'm paying bills and I had bought some gear. So I was really starting to stress out because I thought, oh, like this level of sales is how it'll be forever. So I can bring in people. I was planning all this stuff. I was like, I'm going to bring in people. I'm going to go buy some gear I've really wanted. I've been working really hard. And then early May, sales dropped off. Like I had like a week, no sales all of a sudden. And it
Right.
was a big wake up call that this industry specifically is very unstable and it's really seasonal. And so I had to sell off all the gear and money was a little tighter. And I was like, well, I'm never going to do that again. So it's like trying to learn. It's like, oh, yeah. And, you were so busy, you forgot to pay the cable bill and this and that and the other thing. It's like,
Right.
oh, you can't get the cases from there. You got to get them from here. Oh, it's going to cost X dollar amount more. Okay. Now it's like any little thing, and none of it's the end of the world, but it's just that the whole realization of growing up, and it's tough, man. Like,
Well, you're 6 months into a business. I mean, you're not even six
yeah,
months really.
no, I'm this would be the start of the 6th month of really doing business, but April is when it really started taking shape and becoming like this is a real thing. When I started doing 5 sales a day, Some days when I was working with my dad, I just would tell him, like, I gotta go home now. I can't. It doesn't make sense. I made more in 2 days than I would this whole week working full time. Like, I can't. It doesn't make sense for me to be here when I need to be at home working.
It's the same reason most people aren't going out to get jobs right now.
Yeah, you know, I try not to. I can't knock anybody that they're working the system and they're getting paid and whatever. I
I'm
just have
not
never
knocking
been.
it. It's just like I know so many business owners who are
Yeah,
struggling to get
to
things
get.
done.
I can't. When I was really cranking, I put word out to a few people and I said, dude, I'll pay you $30 an hour and this is what I want you to do. And it was like pretty manageable stuff. And you would be surprised. Like, I wouldn't hear back for days. I couldn't get him to show up the next week or the next week. It's like, dude, like this is more money than I ever got paid to go do something. And it's easy stuff. Like it's not like
Right.
physically strenuous. You're not roofing you're not doing a roof in summertime.
You're not doing a
Like,
tear off.
no, a tear off. That's what I did once in the summertime. And I was like, this
No,
is
it's
probably the
rough
worst
work.
gig. Yeah, no. Installing cabinets in the summer is pretty brutal, and I've done a lot of that, but no.
I've done that as well.
So yeah, it's just moving around when it's hot out. It's like, no, you're gonna be inside. It's assembly work, so it's kind of tedious, but it's not the end of the world, and you're gonna get paid a lot. It's like pretty chill. Like you don't have to start at 5 in the morning like a manufacturing job. And
Right.
I couldn't get anybody to show up. Like I put
That's
word
great.
out to like people I knew were unemployed or underemployed. They're barely working part time or they're still living off their employment. And it's like, dude, I don't know what to tell you, man.
Well, that's going to end in September, and I think a lot of people are going to be, bummed about their lifestyle, their new lifestyle change.
Yeah. And that's what the thing is, man, is I don't know. I grew up in a family where dad was a sole proprietor. So like work and life have always been kind of like work and home have always been intertwined. But this idea of like not having work ethic is foreign to me.
Well,
Like,
you are, you're very ambitious, and
yeah,
I appreciate that. And it's one of the things that I've appreciated watching develop. Um, just I've seen it organically happen right in real time. It's very cool.
yeah. And I'll be the first to tell you, I don't have it all figured out. Like, there's probably plenty of areas, especially with the companies, like refining and getting things, a little nicer, like getting the demos dialed in, getting the website dialed in. Some of that stuff just comes in time. It was like, okay, I need to have a website so I can sell stuff. So just put out the basic thing that's there. Okay, I need to have demos. I'll do my basic demo.
Right.
Oh, I need to post something. And then in over time, you kind of learn, okay, that didn't work. That did work. We're going to do this. Sometimes I try to get some feedback from people that are a little pickier than I am on that stuff because I just don't have an eye for like the art thing. Like I'm not like a drawing artist or a visual artist or graphic designer. I've done a few things, but I just don't have that gift. So I have to rely on people that are more experienced than I am. But I still
No,
have a team. That's the thing
nothing
that
wrong with
I
that.
wanted to. That's the thing I wanted to tell people too. Is like, yes, I do the business stuff. I build, I ship, I inventory, and all that. But I do have a team of people that handle a lot of important stuff for me still too. Which is, I have a guy that does all my print work. So one of the big moves with the transition of the company and all the new products is switching to only doing UV printed artwork. So before I had a mix of like what you had the sticker because I realized the biggest cost factor in a pedal is finish cost. Just like with a lot of things in construction or whatever, it's in guitars, it's like it's the most labor intensive, cost intensive part of the equation. And so I found a way to bypass that. Then I moved to badges, which was like 3M vinyl with the adhesive back, and those look pretty good. It wasn't a bad look, but the one thing that I was missing with that is knob labels. What I realized people really like is having their knobs. It sounds so minor, but every pedal that I put out that has the knobs labeled outsells everything else. I don't know what the psychology of that is, but it is what it is.
You mean that the label is on the actual knob?
Yeah, the knob says what it does, or it has a word that says what the knob does. Those do better.
Then,
No idea.
then if it's labeled underneath.
No, just not labeled at all. So I'm one of like it would have like a name and an art, and then when I had the badge, it just would have like a little picture on it, but it wouldn't say what the knobs do. Those don't sell as well as something that says what the knobs do. It's like
Right.
stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like I'm big. If I had my way, every pedal would have one knob, and I wouldn't tell you what it does. You have to use your ears to figure it out. Because this is the thing: is you make a lot of assumptions before you even start playing with it. Like, oh, I wouldn't set the knob this way or that way. It's like my philosophy, the way all my pedals should work, is you start with everything. You start with your amp quiet, and then you start with everything on my pedal all the way up, and then you dial it back from there until you find your sweet spot.
Right.
It's like that's how I want my stuff to be, where it's pretty intuitive. The Machina is kind of an interesting pedal. That's the most knobs I want to put out on a pedal right now. I had some prototypes with tons of features. So I had a pedal with 12 knobs that I did. I did one with 10 knobs. They were just prototypes that people had
What do
asked
they
for.
do? What do 10 knobs do on a fuzz pedal?
It was two pedals put in one. So it was like a
Got it.
5 knob fuzz and a 5 knob preamp in one box. And then the 12 knob was a 2 knob fuzz, a 5 knob fuzz, and a 5 knob preamp.
Got it.
And because some people like the idea of like the whole rig in one box and you can stack and blend them all together. And it's pretty sweet. But I want to get away from that. I like to keep things pretty straightforward for myself and for the customer, because like what I've learned over time is that like more things is not always better. The more features you add, the higher probability that you're going to give someone the ability to make it sound bad. Is, is my approach. And that's the thing I don't like with some people's designs is like they'll add like a diode selecting switch and a bunch of extra tone shaping. And it's like if you give people the ability to make your pedal sound bad, some dude's going to plug it in for the first time and be like, oh, this thing is terrible. Like it shouldn't take more than like a minute to get a good sound out of a pedal.
Right.
It's like if it's much more than that, or if you have to read the manual to use it right, it's like no, you should be able to use your ears and like just feel it out with the knobs until it sounds good. That's what I always want to encourage people to do. It's like your ears is the most important part. Your eyes, like things should be visually appealing if you're going to be looking at them in a studio all day or on a board. Like you want stuff to look cool. Like that is really valid and important.
Yeah, of course.
But how it sounds is the only thing that really matters. And it shouldn't even matter what parts are inside the pedal, whether they're like a modern inexpensive part that is perfectly reliable or an old unreliable expensive part that's super rare. Like there's in fuzz, this is really common. So it's like, no, I don't have vintage germanium transistors and diodes in this circuit. Like I have stuff that's modern and reliable and consistent. So if I built 10 pedals, they're going to be like 2% different instead of like 25% different from each other.
Right.
Because that's pretty important as you start, if I put out a demo, that's what the pedal sounds like. Like it's not going to be some totally different thing that sounds totally different.
What is the name of the guy from JHS?
Josh?
Is that his name?
Josh Scott, the guy who runs JHS?
Yeah. I've
Yeah, that does
enjoyed
the YouTube.
I've enjoyed his YouTube stuff. I haven't watched it all, but on occasion I'll watch one of his videos. I I love that he smashes the opinion that, like the just whatever I assumed about him, he just sort of destroys that because he's
Yeah,
not a snob.
no, he, I have to, like, there's some people, again, the longer you're in the pedal world, there's kind of some infighting and some opinions,
Sure.
especially the more popular somebody is. It's like it's almost cool to hate on the popular guy or whatever.
Of course.
But I will say about what Josh Scott has done for pedal builders specifically is he's really opened up people's eyes to the possibility that there's more out there than what they sell at Guitar Center.
Right.
There's more out there than, like, he's done a lot more for small builders than probably any other influencer in the guitar world. Like, he alone, I can trace back tons of sales for friends of mine, for myself. And he also is very fuzz forward too. So it helps me a lot that I don't have to champion the merits of fuzz because somebody else has already done it for me.
Right.
Like, there was just, fuzz just wasn't cool for a long time. It was, I mean, it's always been cool, but for the greater culture, I think it's really gone. It's like skateboarding. Like, skateboarding has had ups and downs, just like anything.
Right.
It's like fuzz has gone in and out of style a dozen times, and it's just he's done a lot for the community, regardless of what people had to say about him, or they think he's goofy or whatever they might say. He's done more for small builders than probably any other person.
I appreciate that
world.
he doesn't just talk about pedals that his company puts out. He talks about other people's pedals, and he talks about them in positive light. He'll even say, "This is my favorite distortion pedal of all time. It's not mine."
Right.
I think it's great. I think that's yeah. And I've never met him. I don't know anything about him, and that's fine. I don't need to. It just totally smashes any opinion that I would have about someone who is running a company at that level. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you would never hear Elon Musk say, "Oh man, the new Ford electric pickup is great." It just wouldn't happen. It just
I can just imagine it.
It just wouldn't happen, man.
No. I will say this. I know somebody pretty well that, like, talks to him personally, that knows him well. And he says what people say about him online and what, like, the perception is he's the real deal. Like, he's not a jerk. He doesn't think what people have said about, there's specific things that people have said about him that just aren't true. And he's like, no, he's the real deal. It's just, the problem is the bigger target you are, the more hits you're going to take. And I think that's just a reality of anybody that gets higher profile.
Right.
I've had some paranoia about it, is like, I've had mostly positive experiences, when I was pretty small demo guy and doing the Instagram and things. And then as you start, like, I do a lot of Facebook ad promotion, and the characters that feel the need to respond to a Facebook ad is, it is. Yeah. One of my friends was like, we need to just do a reaction, because I make it a point not to react, like, impulsively and could get on people's case. But man, sometimes I'll be like, can you just go say something on this guy's comment for me? Because I can't take it. Like, sometimes I'll outright delete it, but sometimes I think it's useful for people to see, like, I'll leave some real feedback up on the ad or whatever. But
I'll usually say something like, "You seem great."
Yeah, I said something. So this guy went all off. It was my new pedal, and it sounds great. And he was like, I wouldn't pay $1 for that garbage. And he just kind of went off a little bit on a tangent about how good Pantera sounded. And I said,
well, yeah, that's great, because it costs more than $1.
Yeah. And the comment that I made, because he was kind of going, and a lot of people don't realize, because the company has a name, right? They don't realize it's just me at my house making things by hand. Every single thing that you get is made by hand at my house. So it's like, he's kind of going up, and as I said, oh man, well, we'll try to do better next time. It's like,
there you go.
That's because then it makes them think. It's like, wait a minute. Like, sometimes I think people are trolling just to get a reaction. That's kind of the whole troll thing, is that they're trying to push your buttons to see if they can get you to act up. And so not playing into that, it's really hard sometimes. Especially if somebody goes off. Like, there's plenty of things people could legitimately complain about with the company. Like, when I promised 2-week lead time and it's been 6, like, and I've had to apologize over and over and over again. And you know what's funny? In my mind, I'm always so worried somebody's going to get super upset.
Right.
Like, because I instantly respond to every email or DM that comes in, unless I miss it if I'm asleep or something. But it's like, I'm like, look, this is what happened with that particular thing. This is how far behind I am. And they always are like, oh, cool, man. It's all good. When it gets here, it gets here. And it's like my biggest fear in the world is like somebody's going to charge back the PayPal account. They're going to empty it out and I'm going to be, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, nope.
Are
I
you
just want to,
familiar? Are you familiar with the Four Agreements? The book, The Four Agreements.
no, I don't think so. I used to read a lot. Tell me what the four
Well,
agreements
it's a
are.
very easy book to get through. You could read it in an hour, probably. Um, I'll do my best to remember all of them. The one that was most important for me to hear, I don't always put it into play, but don't, never take things personally.
Right. Right.
Don't take it personally because, what someone says is none of your business. Because you're doing your own thing.
Oh, yeah.
You're doing your thing.
Yeah. And everybody has, and the other thing too is like, there is a really good culture of builders. Like, we tend to try and support each other. Like, obviously, there is some competition in the space that's very strictly fuzz oriented, especially if you kind of cater to the Doom community. There's only really like a handful of companies that do that, that have kind of a profile. But the idea that we're not really competing with each other, we're competing with ourselves for this huge market. And it's way bigger than I would have ever realized. I would have thought, I can only see, the however big the groups are on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. It's like, no, it's a big world. There's a lot of people out there that will buy your products. It's like you don't ever have to really worry about what somebody else is doing. As
Right.
long as what you're doing is solid, if you don't, I'm not trying to sell the same pedal that I sold for $100 for $1,000. Look, you have to have some gauge of the market. I think that was the thing that helped me the most coming into the business was I had a pretty good pulse on like, okay, what price point works? What kind of marketing works? At the small level, especially. It's like, okay, what appeals to people? What do they want to hear? What do they want to see? Like what matters, what doesn't? It's like really all people care about in my demographic is the price and then the look and then the sound.
Right.
Like
Well,
it's
if
you'd be
something is
so
cheap enough, like let's face it, if a
yeah,
a fuzz pedal is 50 or 60 bucks like your first pedals were,
right.
it and it works and sounds good, it's no big deal. Like it doesn't matter. It's not too great of an investment to make in something that even if it doesn't live on your pedal board full time. Even if it's like, oh, I'm going to bust that
Right.
out and play it now, or I'm going to put it on this recording. Um, you know, and I think that that's the beauty of pedals. It's not like
Right.
trying to decide which boutique amp you're going to buy.
Yeah, that's why I started with demoing pedals when I wanted to start doing gear demos again. It's like I used to demo guitars and stuff. It's like, well, I can't buy a no guitar every week, but I can pretty much afford a relatively affordable pedal every week. And so it was like, and then sometimes it was more than that. So it's like
Were
I
you
did what made
buying and
sense.
were you buying and then selling them afterwards?
I did it for a while. I I wasn't big on the I've never been big on the reselling stuff. Like as far as like, okay, I'm gonna buy this thing, I'm gonna have it for like a week or two and then I'm gonna sell it. Like I always would try to avoid the selling part so I wouldn't lose money. But eventually I did sell pretty much everything. But yeah, the smarter way if you're a review guy or something is you either have the hookup or you return it or sell it or something like that.
I gotta say, Portland, Oregon has arguably the best Craigslist in the country.
They have some they have some deals sometimes.
There's a great variety of gear there. The Craigslist in New York sucks. Craigslist there in Portland is as good as LA, if you ask me.
Oh yeah. No, I believe it.
Um, well, listen, man. Uh, we've been coming up on we're coming up on 2 hours, and I want to wrap it up. Uh, I'm really stoked for you.
Yeah.
I'm I'm so happy to see what you've done just in 6 months. Um, and and hope that it just keeps, going up and up and up for you.
Oh yeah. Thanks. No, so what happened as we were sitting here, and I'm trying not to be rude, but it's like I just got one of those emails that I was talking about where someone was like, oh, I haven't heard back from you. It's like, okay, no, we're taking care of it right now. It doesn't matter what's going on in my life. That's just the reality of how my life is now. It's like, this is the thing. Like, we take care of it right now, like whatever it is. But yeah, no, it's been great learning how to run a company and um, learning about pedals. There's so much to it, and it's fun. I'm learning a lot. I enjoy what I do, and it's cool that I get to make it my job now. So thanks for having me on, man.
I'm excited to see what you do with the next year, This is
Yeah,
this is
me
the first
too.
6 months. The next year, look out.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, hey, can you send me do you have any photographs? Do you have any good photographs of you that you use for your website or anything like that I can make posts with?
I'll get some out to you pretty quick.
Awesome.
I'll have to take some Zoom ones, and I'm definitely gonna be wearing my couch riffs merch that I wear every day. See if I can find my hat. I think it might be at my folks' house, but
Okay.
yeah. No, yeah, I'll get some over to you. I was just thinking about that because it came up the last time I did a podcast. I had to take some photos. I was like, oh man, it's like all I take pedals of or pictures of is pedals.
Right. Well, it's been great talking with you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
And
Yeah, sorry. It's like sometimes I'm keeping an eye on the phone and the computer,
oh,
just
buddy,
making
it's
sure
okay. It's
nothing
okay.
sneaks through.
Fine, man. Um, but have a great evening for yourself,
Yeah, thanks, man.
and I'll see you on the Instagram.
Oh yeah, we'll see you, dude.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye.